Does hell exist, Rabbi? There's lots of references in the New Testament, and I notice when you look at each one and you click on their Greek reference, the word defining them is different, like Gehinnom, and one is something else. But there's more importantly, it's definitely got the whole fear factor thing happening, because so many places I'm reading right now in Matthew. Matthew 23, 33, he says, "You serpents, you generation of vipers, how can you escape the damnation of hell?" What could he possibly be? I mean, is there a lake of fire where Satan and all of his angels are going to be burned up?
Okay. So the answer is yes, of course there's a place of hell. If there were no hell, there would be no justice in the world. Okay? But Tanakh spends almost no ink talking about it. So just for a moment, if there was no reward and punishment in the world to come, there would be no justice in the world. Because as it turns out, Anne Frank was a teenager and she died in a death camp. Okay? And as it turns out, Adolf Hitler was able to commit suicide with his bride, Eva Braun, in a bunker in Berlin. Now, if there's no heaven and hell, then this girl died. The lights went out. And Hitler, the lights just stopped, and there's no recompense for his iniquity. So the answer, of course, there is, but it's none of your business. This is very important.
Mm-hmm.
So I want you to listen very carefully. The Christian Bible engages in talk about hell a lot. Why? Because it's very scary. There are many people who are listening to this show. There are certainly many of you who hear my voice right now have family members who are very intelligent in every other aspect of their lives. They make very wise decisions. They're very thoughtful people. When it comes to considering, should I believe in Jesus or not, the cognitive faculties seem to recede sometimes, or even shut down completely, because they're terrified of going to hell. The Tanakh never threatens us with heaven and hell. Never. Now, God does warn us and threaten us and identify himself and who he is and why it's important to be faithful and loyal to him. But he doesn't say because you're going to go to hell. You know why? Because you can't test it. I mean, how do you know if you might go to hell for being a Christian? If Jesus is not God, the second person, the triune God, and you're listening to the show, if you plan to stay a Christian, shut this show off now. Mm-hmm. Shut it off and do not listen to another word. Because if you listen to this and you see, if you look up and you realize that, you know what? Rabbi Singer is teaching, I'm seeing in the Bible, everything he's saying is right, and you continue in your sin of worshiping a man as God, it's very serious. Those Christians who don't know any better, Hashem doesn't judge them for what they don't know. If you are just entertaining yourself as a Christian, and I'm not saying leave Christianity, but at least consider it, really stop listening to the show immediately.
Mm-hmm. Indeed.
Hashem will require it of you. Now here, listen carefully. Heaven and hell can't be tested. So of course it works on Christians. People are terrified of death. They don't know what happens on the other side of the grave. It's horrible. And one of the worst things about dying is not so much that you get tapped on the shoulder and told that you have to go. What's, I think, for many people hard to deal with is that the party keeps going on without you, that everyone else gets to stay alive. And that's really hard for you because they're going, I have to go and the party keeps going. Listen carefully. So this frightens people, it scares people. And the problem with the threat of heaven and hell, the threat, that's to be separated from the reality of it, is that you can't test it. What could you do? Could you go to Home Depot, buy a shovel, go to the cemetery, dig up a grave, open the corpse and say, hey, buddy, what happened? Nothing. You can't test it. If Jesus is not God and you worship as a God, you're very much placing yourself in danger. The thing is, you can't test it. So what does the Torah say? When God introduces himself and says, this is who I am, what does he say? What does he say in Exodus when God presents? He says, I'm not the God who's going to send you to hell for not listening to me. I'm the God who took you out of Egypt. I'm the God who you passed through the sea. I'm the God who you walked under the cloud, who protected you throughout the wilderness. I will be Ehyeh Asher Ehyeh. I will be with you through all times. You are an eternal nation, and that can be tested. Torah does not treat you like children, scaring you with heaven and hell because you can't test it. That is heaven and hell as a threat is the let me just, I want to get this point across, is what is used the recourse of a false religion, because you can't check it out, you can't test it. So therefore, Torah only appeals to history. Zechor, remember, Deuteronomy 5, Deuteronomy 7, 9, 12. Remember. Why would a nation be told to remember something and shoulder that responsibility if it never happened? So the Bible appeals to history. That said, there is a place, hell, but we can't any more understand what hell is than a baby, an unborn baby, can understand what Mozart is. I mean, it's a spiritual place. It's a spiritual place, and it's a place of a certain type of agony. In Jewish tradition, what happens is when a person dies after they're buried, Ecclesiastes chapter 12, verse 7 tells us the soul ascends to heaven and stands before God. Okay? Now, at this point, the person, please God, repented for their sins. There are some people who lived a good life but who sinned and did not repent for those sins. So those people, I'm going to get a lot of questions on this. Their iniquity can be cleansed after they die. This is alluded to in the book of Isaiah. It's spoken of extensively by our sages. A person's sins can be cleansed for up to 11 months, sometimes 12 months, God forbid, if a person has sinned considerably. There are people, but Jews consider it completely arrogant to discuss, oh, he's going to heaven, he's going to hell. I mean, unless we're talking about Adolf Hitler or bin Laden, it's considered arrogant to talk about who's going where. In Christian circles, sometimes people seem to know who's going everywhere. Well, Jews don't talk that way. It's just not. So, but there are those whose lives are utterly wicked, and I mean, you could take those. That means they had to know what they're doing. They did it not for temptation, but because they went to war against the God of Israel. They have no place in the world to come, and they exist in a complete separate detachment from God, which causes agony. And we see it in Daniel chapter 12, verse 2. There are many who lie on the earth. Some will arise for everlasting life, and others for everlasting contempt and damnation. That's all. So there is such a place. But what should surprise people is that why is there so little ink spent on this topic?
Exactly.
Why is it so little? Because Tanakh, what is the purpose of Tanakh? The function of the Jewish scriptures tell you how to live your life today. And I'm going to ask you a question. How does telling you about heaven and hell in any way help you know how to live your life today? All it does, it scares you. It scares the pants off you, that's all. But you do have, for example, you can in Isaiah 22, verse 14, we do have allusions to this. That a person's iniquity may be atoned for after they die. But if you notice, there's like one passage on it. There's Daniel 12. There are a few. There are a few passages about this. There is a passage about the resurrection in Isaiah 26, verse 19, that those who lie on the earth, the faithful, will resurrect, that the earth is only a temporary dwelling for them. But notice the passages that we're discussing. There's not a threat. In Aramaic, it's agav orcha. Aramaic means the prophets happen to mention it. In our rabbinic literature, now sacred literature, there is more discussion of this. So therefore, yes, of course there's heaven and hell. If there was no heaven and hell, there'd be no justice in the world. There are wicked, evil people that die when they're 80 years old, and they are wealthy and they live well and so on. And there are people who are faithful who live very difficult lives. So where is the justice in the world? Without heaven, if there is no punishment or reward, then there's no justice in the world. So, but all we see is to the grave. We cannot see beyond the grave. And the Torah is not going to talk about things that you can't apprehend. It will mention it, but will never threaten you or call you into obedience by saying, I'm the God who will send you to hell. Look at the book of Exodus, the Parshas Va'era, which we're engaging in now, and look at the first chapter. Look at Exodus chapter 3, when Moses asks, what is your name? What does that mean? I am the one who is with you, and I'm going to be with you. Not I am. That's Christian. Means I'll be with you. I'm the God who is with you. That's how you know you can trust you. The Jewish people, are we still here? Yes. Any of you had no any Viskovs or Moors? They once were a great and mighty nation. Babylonians are gone, disappeared. Why? They had no covenant. God kept his promise. And God says, watch the promise. Doesn't get involved in heaven now. You won't know what it is. Is there such a thing? You better believe it. In fact, heaven and hell is more real in a sense than this world is. Because in heaven, in the afterlife, there is no veil. There's no blandishments from Satan, so everyone sees the truth. It was actually, this world is called an Olam HaSheker, a world of falseness. Things we're not sure, unless you have the Bible in front of you, you could be fooled. But it's not going to discuss it because Tanakh was written for one purpose, and that is to teach you how to live your life. And there is nothing about heaven and hell that is going to contribute to that source of information. But of course, in the New Testament, it's constant. 2 Thessalonians chapter 1, verse 8, eternal lake of fire, gnashing of teeth. I don't know what the gnashing of teeth is, but it sounds really scary. But if that's the purpose of it,
very good.